Let's cut the bullshit.
Just drop the job.
Adam and Simon's Bullshit Busters.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adam and Simon Bullshit Busters. My name is Simon Batchelor.
My name is Adam Bastock.
And this week we are joined by Jack Good of Reusabox. So we are going to be finding out this week how Jack has been implementing some different things around circular use of products and also taking on some different initiatives in their business. But without wanting to get too into the details straight away, Jack, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Reusabox and what your business is all about?
So I'm Jack. I'm the founder of Reuseabox, the accidental founder, and we help businesses keep cardboard boxes in use for longer. So, as you said earlier on, Adam, the world's most boring product, potentially.
I didn't say world's most boring. I just said it was quite boring. It's different.
I'm happy to say the world's most boring product, but but yeah, we're thinking a bit differently about it, and basically, if we can keep boxes in use for longer, if we can help businesses do that, we create massive environmental savings, and obviously, it's more efficient, so we can save businesses money. So that's us. That's our elevator pitch, I suppose, at Reuseabox.
Brilliant. And I think you've touched already kind of why I wanted to speak to you and bring you onto the program, because I think there's a trend or a challenge within sustainability where a lot of the companies that get pedestaled or sort of highlighted in the industry can be very sexy. They're doing interesting things. They're doing really kind of new things. They're leading the industry, but it's typically backed up by sort of big marketing budgets or investment and stuff like that. And why I kind of really respect and really like your company and what you're doing is that it is tackling a very traditional problem in that companies are moving boxes around all the time, and quite often they're focusing on recycling them, and we don't need to be doing that because boxes can be reused. And I think you've proven that there is a growth industry there and that your business has been able to grow. So can you kind of give a bit of background over the story of how you came to start the business and perhaps the sort of success and growth you've had so far, or if you're having challenges as well? Obviously businesses is not always the shining sign of it. So yeah, just a bit of history really would be good.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'll go into the story, but just touching on what you said just then, actually, it's a good point. So with cardboard in particular, there's this, I'm going to call it a misconception. Hopefully I don't get any hate for that. But basically there's a misconception that it's really eco-friendly, and you'll notice everything's moving away from being packed in plastic and being packed in paper these days. And we're not here to bash paper at Reuseabox because it is a good packaging material, but people often forget it has a huge impact. I mean, we have to cut down trees to make them, for starters, and the industry is designed around them being a single-use product. I mean, to put it into perspective, do you guys want to guess how many trees we cut down last year to make single-use cardboard boxes? When I say we, I mean the world, not Reuseabox.
Okay, globally, okay. Yeah, you're not you personally out there with a chainsaw.
I mean, let's go with 20% of the trees cut down.
Oh, I don't know the percentage. I'm on about number of trees cut down.
Oof, 10 million.
I reckon it's like 80 million or something like that. But...
You've fallen into my trap.
Yeah.
So last year, just to make single-use cardboard boxes, we cut down just over 3 billion trees with a B. 3 billion trees. And the reason that is obviously an important statistic is, as I'm sure you guys will know, being experts, there is talks of lots of other technologies to try and draw carbon out of the atmosphere, but trees and nature is really probably one of the most effective ways. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, cutting down all these bloody trees just to make these boxes. And obviously they are recyclable, but our point is a lot of the time they're perfectly reusable. There are millions and millions of boxes being unpacked every day just in this country, which could be reused, but they're not, because the company that's unpacking them, they don't need them. So they throw them away and they recycle them. So it's a really simple way, keep them in use for longer, and obviously you can reduce all of those trees from being cut down. And obviously, you've got energy to make them, energy to recycle them, which you can wipe out as well. So yeah, a bit of a misconception on that.
And just the transport, I imagine as well, it's going to be a big thing of just moving those bales of cardboard boxes around because they're not necessarily that heavy, but they're not that light or compact either. They're quite bulky to transport.
Yeah, well, it's a good point. So it's part of a global supply chain paper. So we don't make a lot of paper in the UK. By global standards, a lot of the recycled material is exported. And a lot of the virgin material and recycled material that we use to manufacture in the UK is imported. From places like Scandinavia or Southeast Asia. So of course that's got a really big footprint, just shipping it all the way around the world. Like I said, we're not here to bash paper. It's a very good product. It's recyclable, but we can simply keep it in use for longer, and we can wipe out that impact. So yeah, but going back to the story, so I never intended to sell cardboard boxes because it's very boring. I don't know if you can remember, there was like a Simpsons episode where they go to the cardboard box factory, and it's the really boring school trip that they go on. But we like to think of ourselves as not a box company. But basically, when I was leaving school, so my mum and dad had a small business, and they were struggling, and unfortunately they were going bankrupt basically. And I won't give you the sob story. uh, but basically, me and my dad, we were looking for ways to get money in to pay the bills, and we were wheeler dealing. I think that's a technical term, buying and selling stuff. And then we realised we found a business that was throwing away thousands of used boxes, and they looked brand new to us. In fact, they weren't. They were actually paying to get rid of them, which is what happens. There's an expense, there's a cost to recycle cardboard. So they gave them to us for free, and we found a business around the corner, and we sold them for like £500 or £600, and that was great. Got some money to pay the bills, and we thought, oh, that was lucky. And then we realised after a while that actually this is happening in every town and city across the UK. There wasn't a one-off example. And then we started doing it. And then after a few years, we realized that we actually had accidentally set up a circular economy company, because I didn't even know what the circular economy was 10 years ago.
I think that's really nice to hear, though, because circular economy it feels a very technical term. It feels very big, doesn't it? Economy. Like, I don't know what the economy is. I can't define that. It's everything. But this is a really good example of how simple it can be, and how it doesn't have to be overly complicated or academic. It is just, where are people throwing things away that they don't need to be throwing them away, and as you say, can be kept in use for longer, especially with small businesses where you've got local companies that are probably throwing away a lot of boxes. Like, if you think of a supermarket, I don't know what the numbers would be on how many boxes they're throwing away each day, let alone like over a month.
No, yeah, exactly. And I think that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head there, because like you said, this circular economy idea, it does sound quite academic. But really, it's common sense. It's obviously what we have is like a linear economy. So we take all these materials out of nature. We make products, we sell the products for a profit, and then when we're done with them, we throw the products away. And by that, what we mean is, I think most of our waste is landfilled in the UK, surprisingly, still, unbelievably. Or we incinerate it, in waste to energy sites, which is, you've got a benefit because you're creating energy, but when you burn those products and those materials, you lose them off the face of the earth forever. Or we export them, or we recycle them. We're still recycling a smaller amount of waste than we're sending to landfill, surprisingly. So it really is just, I think we like to call it reuseonomics, right? It's just keeping materials and products in use for longer. As a collective, it's just a lot cheaper. It just makes good sense.
There's two really interesting business things here. One is that you've done the thing that we tell a lot of people to do in the carbon reduction plan workshops that we run, which is to go to the other businesses near where you are based, if you have a physical location, and ask them what they're throwing out, and see whether the thing they're throwing out is something that you're also buying. And I think you've got a perfect example of just that very simple question to ask has actually given you a sort of proper Del Boy scheme that turned into a whole business, which is amazing. You will be millionaires by Christmas. But I think that is a really good example of how as you say, what the badge of the circular economy turns out, it can just be, well, you're throwing it out, we're buying it, let's just swap or put a transaction in the middle of that is great. But getting into the bit more of the detail of the sort of cost saving, what do you sort of see as the major element of cost saving for a business in terms of using your boxes versus buying brand new boxes every time?
We're about 50% cheaper, and that's the cost to manufacture. That's what it would have cost to make a new box. But obviously, when you buy a reused box from Reuseabox, we haven't had to make it, so we don't have to pay to make it. So yeah, we're around about 50% cheaper on cost, and obviously companies that are producing all these used boxes that supply us, there's a cost to get rid of them, so we save them money in the disposal method. So it's it's a very simple, easy sell kind of business model for people. But I think what you said earlier was quite interesting. So I'm sure I heard you say this once, Adam, and I might be paraphrasing a bit, but I'm sure you said something like, it's just, when stuff like sticks in your head sometimes. And I'm sure you said something like, often the most carbon heavy businesses are just the most inefficient businesses.
Yes.
And a lot of the time it's really just about running your business more efficiently. And obviously linking into what we do and what you said, Simon, is basically it's about collaborating. And I think somehow we're not very good at collaborating, I think, as a society. I have this kind of theory that it's to do with, like, the school system, because I kind of feel like um, we all went to like 20th century schools, basically, and in the 20th century they tell people to, you wait for the school bell, you go to the desk and you're waiting for instructions, don't speak to your neighbor, and wait and be told what to do. But in the real world, in the modern world, because we're not running Victorian factories anymore, we need to speak to all the other businesses out there, and we need to collaborate. And it really is easy to be more efficient as a company if you're working with other businesses and customers, suppliers, and even competitors.
It's the efficiency of the entire system, and this is something it will be alluded to. Is carbon is often cost, and if you've got a high cost business that is losing a lot of money, that's probably also leaking quite a lot of carbon. In that, if your
Yeah.
drivers for the vans are doing inefficient deliveries, that's going to be extra miles, which costs more fuel, which also is carbon emissions. So, yeah, I think that's the key thing. Is a low carbon business is often just an efficient one, or
Mm.
can be. So it's the operational benefits are kind of multifaceted. A question for you that would be my sort of gut concern potentially as a kind of customer, or as a potential business using your services, would be the kind of the quality. Like, surely if a box has been reused, has it not got dents in it? Is it not bashed about? Is that not a concern for if I'm shipping that product to customers? What's your sort of process for managing or maintaining that?
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised, especially in like the B2B market. When companies are bringing in um, palletized goods on pallets in trucks. A lot of the time, these boxes, when they unpack them, they're in a very pristine condition.
Yeah.
But of course, there is a lot of the cardboard out there. A lot of the used boxes won't make it for a second life because maybe they're a bit too bashed about. But still, the vast majority will. And that's obviously where we can step in and help. But true circular economy um, is really about like changing the way that we like design, make, use, sell products so that we can keep them in use for longer. And although I would say Reuseabox is a circular model, really what we're doing is we're taking some waste. We're taking a single-use product and we're just moving it to other people to use it to make it reusable. But yeah, really, ultimately, the best solution would be if we were redesigning the way that we make boxes and other products and other materials. That would be the way to design out all of the waste.
And how much of a threat do you see from sort of the reusable logistics containers, to use technical language, because my background used to be in. I used to work for a company that did warehousing solutions, so sort of could be pulled back in on Euro pallets and different pallet sizing. But I know like they used to sell collapsible containers that were made of kind of hard wearing plastic, that therefore you could put
Mm.
it through the system 1,000 times and it would collapse down, and it was far more efficient. Is that something that you see as sort of a competitive issue, or is the market simply so large that it's not necessarily an issue at the minute?
Well, it is a large market. It's roughly something like 50 billion pound a year. What people are spending on cardboard boxes.
Jesus.
So I'm not too worried about that. But I think that is the future. We've been working on some pilot models with a few different companies around like reusable plastic boxes or reusable Corex boxes, which you can send back. The problem is, in a lot of applications, it's not cost effective because they're way more expensive to make. And then you've got the return logistics charge as
Yeah.
well. But I think, I think in the future, if we can work out better materials, again, it's that design thing in the circular economy. But I think that is the future. I think eventually all businesses will have to become circular businesses. It's not going to be a choice because, at some point we're just going to run out of the stuff that we need to make more stuff. Um, so at some point people need to get together, industries and companies, and think, how do we redesign our products? And that includes our packaging so that it is zero waste and it can be always reused and redistributed. So it's more likely that we'll be doing more of those kind of products in the future, I think, rather than seeing it as a threat.
I do think there's a really interesting thing there on the value perception, right? Because when we moved house, we didn't buy a bunch of cardboard boxes, but that was one of the offers from the removal company, was we could either have like reusable plastic containers that they just collect at the end of it, because there is that loop there within that moving business that's much easier than if you're using one directional sort of shipping, which I imagine it causes issues. But I was just like, well, why would I buy cardboard boxes? Why would I not just reuse cardboard boxes from the supermarket that are being thrown
Mm.
away anyway? Surely creating more demand for cardboard boxes just isn't sensible. And that always seemed like that stuck with me years and years ago before I even moved into sustainability. It's just such a silly thing to be doing. Like, why would you need to buy those ones? But I mean, you've proven that that's obviously an opportunity in the market. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it's just this is the way people have always done things, so this is what we're going to do.
Yeah.
There's not unfortunately there's not as many people like you, Adam, that actually think about the bigger picture with these things.
Yeah.
But they are very good. A lot of those they tend to be things like Corex or hard plastics, and they literally will last pretty much forever. And if you're a removals company that can go and collect them from customers after they've used them, they probably are better. But obviously, if you're a removals company that's moving someone to Spain or something,
Yeah.
you might not be cost effective to get the boxes back.
Well, as you say, one directional palletized goods for small businesses that are
Yeah.
shipping stuff, it makes a lot of sense that you wouldn't necessarily have that entire return logistics chain. Because when I was working in that industry, the companies that were using those boxes were Lidl or Tesco's, or people who had control over that entire supply chain, that were big corporates. For smaller businesses, I imagine that the boxes that you're doing are cheaper. It's much more effective. Is that who is your target customer? I guess who is your main audience? Is it small businesses in the local area, or do you tend to work with larger corporates? Sort of, where's your growth come from?
Yeah, surprisingly, anybody that's buying boxes.
Yeah.
so pretty much anybody, but yeah, because we're taking a used product and then we are finding a new home for it. Inevitably, there'll be people where we just have the right size, and then they might have to buy a brand new box. But yeah, and pretty much any business that's using boxes, as long as you're buying at least 20 at a time, we can probably help, and we can probably find you a reuse alternative that's going to be like half price and a lot better for the planet.
It seems quite low kind of order quantities. I'd ever seem to be higher than that. 20 seems very approachable.
Yeah, well, we've always done like minimum order a pallet, but we're just launching like packs, and we're doing like house moving packs and stuff.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, but obviously, as you'll know, there's way more small businesses, right? And these small businesses, I don't have any stats, but my guess would be that in terms of the amount of boxes being sold every day, my guess would be that there's probably more being sold to small businesses than bigger businesses. So it makes sense for us to try and cater for them. I also find that small businesses tend to be much better at making more ethical or sustainable choices. Often when I speak to, often we'll we'll be cold calling every day, and often we'll speak to a big corporate that's got all this campaign around all the great stuff they're doing for the environment, and we'll speak to them, and they won't be interested. But then a small business will speak to them, and they go great, and they'll make a quick decision.
I think you've hit the nail on the head in that small businesses often are able to make that quick decision, but they're also, you're speaking to the person often, or you're speaking to part of a small team who are invested in that whole change. So if they've said, well, we are, committed to a net zero by 2050 plan, that isn't just something that the corporate marketing team came up with and have committed to, and the rest of the business is just business as usual, which is most big corporates. But what you end up doing with a small business is speaking to a team who are like, oh yeah, well actually if we can do something that helps that, they're all invested in that decision. Whereas when you're speaking to a buyer, they're on a percentage of the money they save. So they've got absolutely no incentive to make a green choice, because that literally affects the amount of money they take home at the end of the month. Because if they can say, well, I've bullied this person down on price and I've made 4%, they get a percentage of that percentage. That's how big corporates drive down prices, by getting people on commission to make those choices. So you end up with a disconnect between what the marketing team are saying that company's doing and what the reality behind the scenes is. So it's really interesting to hear from that point of view. But I think
I was going to say that is absolutely true. And I think also sometimes if we're trying to talk a small business into starting to reuse instead of buying new boxes, in our example, it's like, well, this is good. This is £100 purchase, so it's not that big a decision. But sometimes when we're speaking to big businesses, this is £1 million deal that we're trying to close here, and in those examples, I suppose there's a lot more kind of bureaucracy that gets in the way, a lot more people involved. But I will say, so we started this round about 12 years ago ish, although the first few years we didn't know what we were doing. So, but it's amazing from my experience seeing the difference, the shift in businesses, in the perspective that businesses have on sustainability and on impact. I mean, I can remember meeting people, 12 years ago, and they didn't know anything about, sustainability, about recycling, about circular economy. They'd be laughing us out the room, telling us to do one kind of thing, saying nobody cares about it. But now I do think there's more businesses, even the bigger ones. I've had some really great experiences with really big companies recently, who actually really seem to care about it, and they seem to be putting, they seem to be wanting to do the right thing regardless of cost. So there's definitely a change happening. And I always like to joke as well that when we first started going round, I looked about 12. I think I was like 17 or whatever, but I looked about 12, and it was always like this kind of middle-aged white 50-year-old man that I'd be speaking to, and it really didn't resonate. But I always joke that they must all be dying out now, because I seem to be looking at someone, and they seem to be like the same as me, this more my kind of age and more my kind of they just look more like me basically. So it's definitely changing. So yeah,
there's definitely a dinosaur fossil fuel based joke in there somewhere, but I'm not quite quick enough to make it.
Yeah.
But I think that is kind of the key thing, right? Is if you're talking from a technical point of view, you are decarbonising their supply chain and their problems. You are addressing that problem for those larger companies where they need to reduce their emissions. And if your boxes are, 50% of the emissions of a virgin grade box, just basing that off of the cost comparison, then why wouldn't they use you even if it is a bit more of a premium experience? The cost is likely to be the deciding factor there. If you're ticking multiple boxes and you're able to solve multiple solutions there, it makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, I suppose we're lucky because we have that kind of no-brainer kind of proposition to people. But no, yeah, it's definitely changing. Like, definitely businesses are definitely, like, I've witnessed it in my own eyes, a huge shift. So yeah, it's exciting, really.
And I think from my side, that to me feels like it's coming from the small business angle, in the sense that as more and more small businesses are sort of seeing the consumer wanting to make a different choice, then they're making different choices, and then they're sort of pushing that up to the big businesses at the same time. Whereas the legislation is coming down for the big businesses, it kind of feels like it's finally meeting in the middle. Whereas before it was like a few big corporates and a few small businesses, and there was a gap, and it feels like that gap is kind of closing as more and more people get involved with it. Um, so have you found that your sort of business is growing purely because the demand is growing, or do you think that the demand has stayed about the same, but the appreciation or the kind of hunger for what you're delivering as a sustainable option is what is getting people over the line?
A bit of both, really. I mean, like I said, we're really lucky because the demand for cardboard boxes has just been on this huge growth curve. Because of ecom, because of more globalization. You've got all these fulfillment companies and wholesalers and distributors. You just didn't have those 25 years ago, which has meant there's just been this huge increase in demand for cardboard boxes. So we're very lucky for that, but definitely. I've witnessed that businesses just seem to care more about having a lower impact product, especially packaging. They really care about having a lower impact packaging, um, and yeah, and I think if anything, I think that businesses seem to be ahead of the legislation. Like, I don't think the legislation is particularly heavy, to be honest. I think I think most businesses can get away with doing the same things they were doing 30 years ago, and I don't think there's going to be any negative impact for them. So, I hope that changes, but I'm not really seeing much legislation that's having any effect, really. So,
I think the key, probably one of the reasons why, if I was to kind of hypothesize about that, is because the packaging is the one touch point that businesses will have with their customers. That is sort of the unboxing experience, right? Is that
Hmm.
if they get a box
yeah,
that says on it, "This is a reused box that it is saving 3 billion trees a year," or whatever it was, that's a great thing for them to tell. That is also cheaper. It's just got that multiple benefits there that I think is, as you say, it's a no-brainer. Why wouldn't you have a nicer story to tell to your customers when they're opening that, whether that's B2B or B2C? I don't think that has to be an unboxing in the home. That might be someone cutting open a pallet of shrink wrap and going, oh, well, at least the boxes are reused, even if the plastic packaging that's wrapping the pallet together is still plastic. There's some limits of what's possible there.
yeah. And on that, I think because obviously there has been this really big trend for like really fancy branded, personalized packaging effectively, especially in the kind of like the B2C kind of e-com space, where you get this pretty branded piece of art
Mm.
with your product in. And obviously that kind of goes against what we're doing a bit, because if we're going to have something that can be reused, it has to be standardized, and you can't have all that kind of branding. So yeah, but I think people are seeing more value in having a lower impact product than having a more branded, personalized, pretty product.
Can you go into the scale of sort of your operations a little bit, and without being obviously too commercially sensitive, but it'd be good to hear the impact you're having, because it feels like you've probably had quite a decent dent in your local community in terms of those boxes over the years, or just the scale of
I
operations, I
think
suppose.
so. Yeah, I do have some actual stats on my computer, which I can dig up if you want. But let me find it first, and then
I'm
maybe we can
excited
edit
for
this a
what
bit.
sounds like a spreadsheet coming, Simon. This is always a good moment. The podcast first is a live spreadsheet unveiling.
Well, I wasn't going to share it. I
No,
mean, I
no.
can share it if you want,
I
but
was going to say, don't share it on screen, but it's good to know it's there.
Yeah.
yeah. Let me have a quick look. I would. It's just there's so many numbers; it gets hard to memorize them sometimes. But
Yeah, I can imagine.
all right, so we've redistributed more than 10 million boxes to be reused.
Jesus.
That's saved more than 70,000 trees from being cut down. More than nearly 10,000 tons of carbon's been saved. It's the same. That's the same as about 15,000 seats on a return flight from London to New York. We've also planted nearly 250,000 trees, and on that, so sorry, just finding the screen again. On that, so I forgot to say this really, but it's not really something that we kind of promote too much. But basically, when we accidentally set up this cardboard box company, and we realized actually we set up an environmental, a circular economy company, we thought it was quite cool, and we thought, well, let's try and actually, it's good that we're keeping trees in the ground here, but let's try and do something a bit better. So we thought, okay, let's try and fix the, I guess, the damage that's been caused by the businesses that came before us. So we decided, okay, every time we sell a box, let's take some of that money, and once we've paid our costs, let's try and invest in environmental or social projects. So our first thing was to plant 1,000,000 trees, and we've done about 250,000 now.
Wow.
And a few other kind of smaller projects, more social things as well.
I think it helps tell that story though of going. I think that phrase you mentioned of undoing the impact the businesses have come before you is actually really compelling. Most people won't be thinking about that, and I think that's a great recognition. And this is a phrase that someone, Hannah Cox of the Better Business Network introduced me to recently, which was cathedral thinking, which I really liked and I hadn't really come across before. Of you're building projects that are bigger than yourself, that you might not see to live to see the completion of, like those 250,000 trees, but you're still doing it because it is building something that's bigger than yourself and is going to outlast you and be this sort of cathedral or big statement piece for society to look at. And that's something that I struggle with Small 99 to know what that looks like exactly, and how to kind of quantify that, because it's not as physical. But yeah, I think that sort of the social benefits, the environmental benefits, and that historical tackling of what businesses have done before you, I think all adds into that. And I wouldn't shy away from that as a story to tell, which I don't think you are. But.
I think that's quite an exciting way of looking at it, really. But I remember it was actually quite recently I had a meeting with quite a big food manufacturer, like doing like more than $1 billion in sales, so quite a big British food manufacturer, about trying to work with them. And I was with the senior team, and I was telling them about this. And one of the directors was like, how can you afford to do that? Doesn't that just cost you shitloads of money?
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, we do it, and we make less profit as a result. He couldn't really quite grasp it.
Yeah.
But I think there probably is some kind of return. Not that we're able to track it, but we have been able to kind of, not quite intentionally, but we have built this kind of like purpose-driven company, and it definitely. I mean, not that I've ever had another job or ever worked in another company, so I might be grasping on assumptions here, but I'm pretty certain that I just think it feels a bit different when you work in that kind of company. There's a different kind of energy. People seem to care more about stuff, and I think it probably does have a positive impact on the bottom line.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I like to keep telling myself.
Well, it's a great phrase. I'm not sure where it came from, but culture eats strategy for breakfast, or whatever it is, where it is this idea that culture is something you can't really buy in or replicate. Strategy, you can get consultants around a table to build that, but that culture piece is really hard to build into an organization. And if you can do that through things like, doing a lot of tree planting and positive initiatives in local communities, then that's going to always beat out someone who's perhaps just selling reusable boxes, and doesn't have that story that you have of where it came from, the fact that it's small business focused, the fact that you've grown it over the past 12 years to this point. That's what people are buying, and you can't track that. You can't put a monetary valuation on that. But that doesn't mean it's not a good thing to be doing, as you say.
I think it's just more fun, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
basically,
it's a much better way of looking at it.
Well, I mean, I think, not to be too morbid about it, but, there's very little point being the richest person in the graveyard. It's like, you can only make so much money. I'm a big believer in that. It's like, yeah, you could have a few extra quid in the bank, but realistically, would your life be much better if it was? Or would your life be better because you planted all those trees? It's like, realistically, when you get to the end of your life, are you going to regret that you didn't make 5% more profit year on year for 12 years? I mean, some months, some quarters, you probably would be, but I think it's like a real strong legacy to be able to say, well, we chose to do the difficult thing, rather than the profitable thing, and we're still making it work. So not only is our business strong enough to be going for 12 years, but it's been doing that, and we've been doing this really good thing that we don't have to do on side. So you've got a really strong business proposition. If you ever come to sell that business, you are in a really strong position because you can prove that you can make money even voluntarily doing something that some people might not say is a really strong isn't the obvious choice, but to you it feels like the right choice, so it's the obvious choice. And I think that's not only commendable, but it shows that you're in a really resilient place and as a business for sure.
Yeah, I think as well. I think it kind of like I'm just kind of this. Not can't prove this, but I kind of feel like kind of subconsciously, like within our company, it kind of, it's like it's teaching us that we don't have to get paid for everything. It's teaching us that we're doing hard things. I mean, collecting tens of millions of single-use boxes and finding other people to use them. There's a reason that the box manufacturers don't do that, because it's really bloody hard and annoying. But I think like on a really simple level, it's like it's teaching us how to do really hard, complex stuff. And I think if you can get over those problems together and have fun doing it, I think it builds a really strong company, to be honest. And I think it inspires people and it leads to other projects. And yeah, never thought about it like that.
It's just more than the sum of its parts, right? All these kind of wheels or cogs are moving together and helping build that resilient company that is quite hard to see, I guess. It's quite hard to understand that until you take a step back and realise it. Or see another business that is not doing it, as you say, like a big corporate who might be a bit more boring and not as socially motivated. And you go, oh, well, okay, no, we actually are quite a bit more interesting than we realise. I'm well aware that I opened this calling you a very boring business, but there we are.
Yeah.
That was on me. I'm sure we'll get plenty of angry comments at me. That's fine. Happy to take that on board.
Yeah. So, Jack, if you were thinking about another business in a different sector that might be thinking, we have the opportunity to plant 1 million trees, but I don't know if we should. What would you say to that business? They're thinking they're on the edge of that sustainability decision. What would be your advice to another business owner?
When you say they've got the opportunity to plant,
well, as in,
trees,
like, let's say that they had another, they have a sustainability initiative, and they're fork in the road with they're right. I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do it. What would be your advice to someone who's having to make a decision about whether they should make a sustainable choice in their business?
Well, I guess it comes down to why you're making that choice, doesn't it? I think obviously it's good to do these things, but I don't think. I think companies need to make sure they don't do them just because it looks good. I think if you can do them because there's actually an important purpose to it that you align with, I think then you probably will get some kind of ROI, culture wise and team wise. Not that they shouldn't do it, just to look good, but it's, yeah. Did I answer that well?
No, I think it's a really important point, because I think a lot of companies, do it. Not to name and shame, but there are some big corporates out there who buy the things they sell in a plastic bag. They take it out of the plastic bag and put it into a paper bag and then send it to you. They're not doing anything green or sustainable or any of the other words you want to call it. It's purely a greenwashing exercise. And I think what you've identified there is right. It's like, if you've got the opportunity to do something that makes sense for your business, is connected to what you're doing, and it feels like the right thing to do, then that's the reason to do it, not because it's like, well, this will make us look good for doing it.
I think a company can get like toxic quite quick. And I think all these little decisions, it all comes down to like purpose and why you're doing things. And I think ultimately you can build a better business no matter what you do if you can link that purpose back to everything. And I think sustainability is the same thing. There's a purpose behind it. We're not just trying to be more sustainable as a society for the fun of it. We're doing it because if we don't, then we won't have a society. That's basically why we're doing it. So
it's a pretty good mission.
Best to try and remember that, I think. Yeah.
Well, and also, worst case, we end up with more trees. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
it's not like it's an evil scheme. It's like the
Yeah.
worst outcome is there's more trees. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Jack. That's been really interesting to learn more about your business, and I think I feel comfortable in saying it. The difficult decisions you're making in doing the right thing and doing something that feels good for your business, and I think that's going to inspire a lot of people to just like stand up and be proud of what they're doing, and also maybe make a difficult decision they've been putting off. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. So how can people buy boxes from you? Tell us about that.
They can go to reuseabox.co.uk, and you can order boxes on our website, or drop us a line, message us, LinkedIn us.
That's excellent. Nice one. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Jack. And thanks everybody for listening and watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you soon.
Let's cut the bullshit
Just drop the job.
and assign